Hey everybody, I'm Jay Danley. Welcome to my second installment of my analysis of the work of Carl Stalling, the genius that created the original cartoon music. You should check out the recording, the Carl Stalling Project, where there's all kinds of outtakes and crosstalk and studio talk. You can really get some insight into hearing how these amazing recordings were made. For me, the music in those Bugs Bunny cartoons, Daffy Duck cartoons, the Warner Brothers cartoons, all the way from the late 30s right up to the 1970s, was absolutely incredible stuff. I always knew that it was. I always knew, even as a kid when I was hearing it, that what I was hearing was something absolutely insane. I knew that the level of musicality and how difficult it must have been to actually pull any of that off with any group of musicians, let alone write it. Must have been an amazing accomplishment. I've always been amazed by this, and so I still think that Stalling was a total genius. I love Carl Stalling's material. I love the work that he did. It was totally innovative and influential. And anyway, here's part two. This is called Carl Stalling's Additional Contributions. During the course of his work with Warner Brothers, Stalling worked with sound effect engineer Treg Brown. Sound effects were, of course, an integral part of the cartoons. Originally, all sound effects were made by musical instruments, but Treg Brown, himself an accomplished musician, had an immediate genius for improving the quality of the Warner Brothers cartoon soundtracks to a motion picture level. That's from a video that's on YouTube called Crash Bang Boom, The Wild Sounds of Treg Brown by Keith Scott. Brown, like Stalling, had the benefit of being able to use the Warner Brothers Studios resources. In this case, any sounds from any of the Warner Brothers films could be used. Just as Stalling would use popular songs owned by Warner Brothers, so too would Brown use the sound of a truck stopping suddenly, which was originally used in a James Cagney film, for example. He would combine this with his own field recordings, creating and maintaining a sound library for Warner Brothers. I know that he was known for going around with back in the day, the field recordings were made with very large, bulky, reel-to-reel magnetic tape recorders. Very, very difficult to carry around, and you had to have a mic that was attached to it. We're talking about a serious labor of love here in order to be able to pull that off. Stalling and Brown would work from the same set of notes called bar sheets. These are much like manuscript paper, music manuscript paper, with several horizontal lines having spaces for dialogue, sound effects, music, and action. That's from a book by John Hallis called Timing for Animation. Stalling and Brown would work from the same set of notes called bar sheets. These are much like music manuscript paper, with several horizontal lines having spaces for dialogue, sound effects, music, and action. The director is concerned with timing the action, and this is entered in the spaces very much as music is written, but in a kind of animator's shorthand. That's from a book by John Hallis called Timing for Animation. At this point, I'm going to put in an example of a bar sheet with Stalling's notations. You've got Carl Stalling's handwriting on here, so you can see how these papers would look. The numbers on the top line of each box show how the action has been divided into sections. The numbers on the second line indicate the amount of frames of film per section. 16 frames equal a half second of action. There are general direction notes, and Stalling's musical notations fill the bottom of each box. These bar sheets show how composer, illustrator, director, and sound effect person work together. Stalling's and Brown's work complemented each other. Often Stalling would orchestrate the music in such a way as to allow Brown's sound effects to take the fore. This is where Stalling made a further contribution to animated film scoring. No longer was the musician expected to fill all the sonic space or accentuate every piece of action, but could leave space for other sounds. An example from the cartoon Rhapsody in Rivets, in which a building is built to the music of Liszt's Second Hungarian Dance. It has a scene where a carpenter bangs nails to the rhythm of the notes. This combination of music and sound effects would have an effect on cartoons going forward. This combination of music and sound effects was an example of how Stalling invented some of what would eventually become the cliches of cartoon music, where the action on screen is mimicked by the musical accompaniment. Not only would the music accentuate the visual action, but it would work in conjunction with other comic elements. Music mimicking on-screen action would be the common practice for decades, with sound effects providing sounds instruments could not make. It would not be until much later that music and sound effects would be more separated, with music being used only to set moods. Another contribution Stallings made was the use of the click or tick track, a practice of creating a metronome so that the music would be accurately timed. Originally, this would be done by counting the frames and puncturing the film at the appropriate frame. As the film would pass through the projector, an audible click would happen. This was then sent through a system which fed the sound into headphones, which each musician and conductor would be wearing. Some say that Stallings invented this, while some maintain it was by film composer Max Steiner. It was, however, first used by Stallings in cartoons. Says Stallings, the tick system was not really an invention, since it was not patentable. The thought struck me that if each member of the orchestra had a steady beat in his or her ear from a telephone receiver, this would solve the problem. Warner Brothers cartoons also made use of a relatively new technique called overdubbing, a new technique in the day, a system of using multiple recorded tracks simultaneously, where the sound effects and voices would be combined with the score. The earliest known use of this technique was done by RCA Victor in the 1920s. Now, I should add at this point that one of the things that I did when I did these papers on Carl Stallings' music, I actually transcribed two of his cartoons, two of his scores. I've put one of the transcriptions as a PDF file in the description box. There's a link to a Google Drive where if you want to see a full score of a Carl Stalling cartoon, my transcription is up there. You can the link is there, so feel free to go ahead and have a look at it. It's really, really interesting stuff. I should say that in order for me, I believe that I read that it took Carl Stalling a week to do a score for a cartoon, and I can believe that because when I was transcribing it, I didn't have to come up with it, but what I found was this, that in order for me to be able to transcribe 30 seconds of the cartoon, it would take me 2 hours to get everything that I could get. It's incredibly dense stuff. It's not predictable. It goes all over the place. You don't know what's going to happen next. It's sometimes very difficult to tell what instruments are doing what. Is it a bass clarinet or is it a bassoon? Who knows? You got to really get in there and use your ears to try to figure it out, because of course the scores, as far as I know, if anybody out is watching this and knows where you can get an actual Carl Stalling score, I would so love to see it. Please contact me, write to me via YouTube. Tell me if it's available anywhere. I'd totally love to see it. Anyway, my transcription is up there, as well as an analysis of the same cartoon. Cartoon was called Rabbit Seasoning. I talked about it in the first installment, and so there's a full transcription of Rabbit Seasoning and an analysis. They're both in the description, so have a look at that. Thanks for listening to me ramble on there about this. I hope you get excited about Carl Stallings' music and animated film. I want to have conversations with people around the world about this kind of stuff. So if you see this, and when I post this places, please respond. And I'd love to see if anybody's got work that they're doing on this. Please let me know about it. And thanks for watching. And I'll be back with the third installment soon. Bye.